Hey guys, today is a very special day because we're going to be making something that looks like this. Okay, so first things first, we are going to focus on creating this entire icy landscape, and this is made by Trapcode MIR. Then what we're going to do is we're going to focus on these snowflakes, and then if you want to stick around, you can stick around for the green screen part, and that's awesome. But the main highlight of this entire tutorial is creating this icy landscape, which is a little bit high resolution and very snowy and icy looking like. Okay, so let's get started. We're going to go into After Effects and we're going to start a new composition called Moonrock Island. And then we're going to go into Layer, New, Solid, and you can call this Mirror. Effect, Trapcode MIR. Basically, this is the effect that I used. Now, as you can tell, there's geometry, fractal, etc., etc. All these 7 parameters that make up this entire plugin. We're going to start from the top down. So we're going to start with geometry. You're going to go to rotation X, you're going to make it like 91, and then you're going to go into size X and size Y. You can make this 1980 by 720. You can adjust the rotation so you can kind of look at it, and as you can tell, it's very low poly, very rocky looking, not very realistic looking at the moment. So this is where fractal comes into play. You're going to open fractal, you're going to go into frequency, you can lower this to 200. Then what you're going to do is you're going to take the complexity and turn it up to 8. This adds a little bit more detail to it. Then what you're going to do, you're going to go back into geometry, and you're going to increase the vertices X and Y to a higher value. X can be 640, Y can be 700. And as you can tell, there's a lot more detail on this island at the moment. Now this is what I'm going to do. Just so I can take a good look at this entire landscape, I'm going to go into Layer, New, Camera. Then I'm going to go to Layer, New, Null. I'm going to take this camera, I'm going to parent it to my null object. I'm going to make my null object 3D. And, okay. So, right now, there's going to be a lot of lag because there's so much detail and it's very high poly at the moment. I'm going to take the vertices X and Y to a bit of a lower value. I'm going to change it to like 150 by 150 so I can kind of take a look at it. So the null object, I'm just going to get closer to it, and as you can tell, okay, this is how I'm going to travel in this space. Go back to Mirror, and this is the key to making this entire landscape, is there's 2 things. You need to shade this thing properly, and then we need to add mountains and peaks and valleys. So we're going to go into Shader. Ambient Occlusion, you're going to go into On. Then you're going to turn this Ambient Occlusion Intensity to 232. Keep the radius the way it was, keep the lift exactly where it was. Check the scale and turn it to 5.1. Then what you can do, you can go back, take your vertices, bring it back to 640 by 600, and now we've added a lot more shading to this. You can even change the blend mode to normal. So, actually normal is better for this situation. It's the best option for this. So we are going to go into the most important part of this tutorial now, which is in Fractal at the very bottom, below Seamless Loop. Open the Z range and the individual amplitude and frequency. Change the individual amplitude X to about 23, the Y to 115, amplitude Z you can change it to 1150. And as you can tell, there's tons of noise on this thing because we just increased the amplitude of the Z value. Now this is where the Z range comes into play. You can actually control the depth of this entire landscape here, and this is where it all comes into play. Take your Z max and bring it to like 0.23, and you can start lowering the mountains and stuff. Now, just so this goes a little bit faster, I'm going to just lower the vertices to about 200 by 200, and I can actually see what's going on. And you can take the Z max value, and this is where you can adjust your peaks and valleys and your mountains, and basically you're just controlling how this looks. The Z max value is what I used to make my video, where I was just animating, or rather keyframing, this value starting from -0.5 all the way up. Now I understand at this time this island looks very rocky and doesn't look very snowy and roundish. The only answer to this is in fractal, go back to complexity. From 8, go down to 4, or yeah, something like that. And this will allow you, and then just adjust the frequency. So this will allow you to create something that's a lot more smoother looking, smoother hills, rounded edges on the mountains and stuff. And then you can start now playing with the size X and the size Y in space. You can start to play with this thing, and you can already see, okay, now this landscape is really coming to life. And rotate it however you feel like. It still doesn't look quite realistic, so the only answer to this is layer, new, solid. Let's start with BG1. We're going to create a background, and we're going to make it like pale blue. And you're going to press OK. Bring it below Trapcode MIR, and then you can start to create a background on this thing. I know it's a little bit bright right now, but yeah, and then you can take this guy, mask it a little bit on that edge, feather this out, duplicate this layer, layer solid settings, make this like grayish, and then go mask, invert. Now we've covered this side of the landscape. And then yeah, just adjust it to however you feel fits your taste. And basically that should be awesome looking for now. And I'm just going to adjust the background just a bit. And you can lower the feathering. You can duplicate this layer. If you feel like, you can even add a pale yellow. Pale colors just add a lot more realism to your environment, so I tend to use that quite a bit. Now you've got background 1, 2, and 3. If you don't want too much yellow, you can just thin that out. And awesome. You can take your blue and maybe even make that more dominant. There. So this is basically going to be my environment for now. Now the next step is a bit tricky. Like this is not so straightforward, especially when you're trying to create like maybe a battle scene or something on this environment. So we're going to have to be very, very careful about this. And look, if you see a lot of these edges and stuff, that's basically, just keep going back to vertices X and Y. If you make this like 640 by 400, now you've got a lot more detail on this thing. Go back, and you can see that it really does come to life. And if you rotate this, start rotating this island and take a real good look at it. Now, to add more realism to this entire thing, I will teach you guys how to make the fastest sun possible. You're going to layer new, go to optical flares, so you can name your solid OF for optical flares. Go to optical flares, go to Effect, Video Copilot, Optical Flares. Now this is basically the first optical flare that you get. So you go to Options, and all you have to do is remove the spike ball. And then I believe you remove the glint. And now you've got this. So you press OK, and you just like increase the brightness, go to the transfer mode, and turn this into screen. And this is easily the fastest sun you'll ever make. Very, very simple and easy to make. So I highly recommend that. And you know what? Instead of this pale yellow, I'm just going to go with maybe a gray. Cool. Awesome. Now, we've done all of this work. Now it's time to add the main character inside and to create something cinematic with some snow. I'm going to layer new solid, snow. I'm going to Effect, Trapcode, Particular. And we can solo this layer so we can take a good look at it. Right now, it's just, this is the default way that all these particles emit. So we're going to change this to maybe like 50 for now. And this version of Trapcode Particular is a little bit more advanced, 2.5, so it's a bit different from the old one, but it's essentially the same thing. It's just emit behavior continuous, that's all you really need. then I basically start to create my snow. So emitter type box, change the emitter size to 1000 for the x-axis, maybe a lot more. The y value, just make this a lot more, and the x value especially needs to be a lot more because your island is quite big. And then you need to have gravity affect these things, but we're going to get to that in a bit. Go to particle, size, you can change that to 5 is fine. The size over life is the most important part, so you're going to go into presets and just change it to this value so that the birth and death is happening quickly. Oh, I forgot one thing. Before we move on to size over life, go back to the emitter parameter and make sure that you turn the velocity and all this to a low value. Velocity can be 9. This should be 0, 0, and 0. And now, as you can tell, it's quite sporadic at the moment because the life of this thing needs to be a little bit higher. As you can tell, it's slowed down quite a bit. You can change the velocity to 0. That's fine. And what we can do, turn the opacity down. Opacity random's good. Size random is also good for snow. I changed the sphere into cloudlet, so it looks a little bit more snowy. Then we can go back down to physics. Air is okay. Gravity can be a little bit higher of a value. And that's basically your snow. And you can add more if you like. You can change the emitter size, you can add more particles. Make sure it covers the entire screen. Then go back down, change the air. This adds a little bit more realism, is not the spin frequency, but the turbulence field. And then here you're going to change this to 72, which is the ideal range. 72 to 90 is the ideal range. You want that to happen. And just add a little bit more there. And then what you can do is affect the fade time. You can even affect the opacity random, so some of them are more clear than others. And this will help add more realism to your thing. The key that I did was I just bumped up the particles so it looks like there's a lot of snow. And when you isolate this one layer, now you've got snow in your environment. Keyframe your null object at the very beginning of your scene, or somewhere near the beginning. You can change this to somewhere at this point. I'm going to start somewhere down here where my character is, maybe somewhere there, and then we're going to pull back the camera to reveal the entire island. Okay, maybe not too much, so it's just kind of hovering in space, but that was it's basically the idea. And then you can start adjusting it however you feel like, basically. You know, you can make it more flat, you can make it, yeah, just basically that. You can take your 2 keyframes, ease them, and adjust it however you feel like. This really throws me off sometimes, is there's tons of graphs that show up, so all I do is go to auto select, and then I just find what I need. And there you go. Now the camera's going to pull back and reveal the entire island. The only thing that is missing at this point is basically, before the green screen part, is I went into my parameter of Z max, which is what I keyframed, and I'll make this the max value and I'll push this down. And then here I'm going to make this value, lower this value to negative. There. That's basically your cutoff point when the peaks and valleys start to happen. So what we're going to do is start out at negative 0.5, I believe. Yeah. And then once the sword hits the ground, you start seeing the mountain starting to grow. So you can easily use that as well. This basically was what I did. Now this is the key part. I'm just going to show you guys this green screen part a bit quickly. I'm not going to get too far into it, but I'm going to do it nonetheless. I'm going to take this footage, which I have, and if you want it, just let me know. It's basically me smashing the ground. I'm going to take this, bring it into After Effects, and it's this guy. And then I'm going to add it over here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a garbage mask real quick all around here. There. I'm going to go to Keylight and Keying, and then I'm just going to choose this green color, and then we're going to start adjusting little values here and there to make it look more realistic. And the idea was just to make sure that the person fits in the environment. And you can start to adjust these values. For example, screen black and screen white are probably the most important here. And then what I do is I take the curves option and I brighten it up because there's a lot of snow. And you can like soften the edges a bit by screen soft. And then one thing that really helpful is the tint value. You can like add a little bit of tint to it so it's more reflective of the environment. Make sure your mask is just about right. Make it 3D. You can see it disappears because it's in 3D. And yeah, we're going to have to adjust this guy so that he is somewhere inside this environment. So this is what we're going to need to do. If you go to Trapcode MIR, you're going to notice the position Z of this entire island is 0. If you lower the size completely, you'll notice that the center of this island is here. And if you go to the top angle, you will want this guy, or your character, to be somewhere in the middle. So that, you know, it just feels right. You go back to active camera, and then, you know, start bringing him down. Maybe you can bring your island, yeah, actually, you know what, yeah, just bring him down, and there you go. And then, as the camera pulls back, you can tell, like, okay, he's still in that one spot. Cool. Now, go back to mirror, and we're going to start to reveal more of this island by adding more size Y, 1000, I believe. Maybe a lot more. And then, you know, you can start to play with it a bit. And here's another thing, is all of this stuff is basically on how you feel about this entire, you know, where you want your character to be and all of that. You can even make him stand over there. You can make your camera, adjust your camera so that, you know, it's kind of pointed at him there. And one more thing is I use this thing called RG, Red Giant Shadow, and this just basically speeds up the process of adding a shadow. So I just take these 3 coordinates and adjust it. I know the sun's in the back. This is not the most physically accurate world we're living in, but hey, it's close. I don't do front lit or light. It's basically a setting in RG Shadow. I mean backlit. So if you choose backlit, now the shadow is going to be in the front, which makes more sense. But issue with that is, for some reason, the shadow comes on top of the shoes, and I don't even know how to fix that. So if you guys know how to fix that, then let me know. So here's this. This is basically your shadow, and it just adds more realism to your environment. You can cut all of this off and all that. And then your island starts to grow as he hits the ground. And I'm just going to choose that part of the video where I smash the ground with my sword. There. Now we can take camera back towards him. And yeah, so as soon as this happens, the mountains start growing. And what I did was, number one, when the character smashes the ground, I did a quick camera shake right at that point, which basically just is you take this keyframe and then you just add a little bit of Y, go back down just a bit in the next keyframe, maybe go left, and then just come back to the original area, and this adds a quick shake. The only key with this is to make sure that you don't go too far off from your original values. You want to make sure it's subtle, and yeah. Another thing I did is you can see in Trapcode MIR the Z max is starting to grow from this point on. So the first hit allows the mountains to spur out a little bit more quickly. So what I did is I just added a lot more, like at the beginning. Like right here, I just added like some. And you can add more detail to your mountains and stuff. And then what I did was, then it starts to really grow. And yeah, you can start adjusting the sound effects however you feel like. And let's take a good look at this. Also, when you're dealing with your snow, make sure that your snow starts to grow, in particular, if you just use it from the start. So you can move this layer back, and now you've got snow in the very, very beginning. Awesome. And what I did was I kind of went past the green screen at that moment, so I just kind of took the feather Y and adjusted that value, and then brought it down at this point. So you take your camera, going here, maybe even through the character, and then you can play it. Let's see how this looks. Now here is something that I actually didn't go over with you guys, which is also very, very important, is this value over here, the amplitude X, Y, and Z. You can really play with this stuff and get some really strong results however you feel like. I mean, this will spread out your island, this will make it look more realistic, however you feel like. And you can also play with the visibility. This allows you to add fog or remove fog from your area. So basically areas, like for example, let me show you this. If you take your size Y and really bump this value up, like really high, it starts to stretch out quite a bit. And now what you'll notice is, and even your X like really, really high, and now what you'll start to notice is like, if you're gonna, by the way, if you increase these values, you have to increase the vertices if you want to maintain that level of polygon quality. So if you go back here and you play with the visibility, you can start to see that, okay, if I were to lower the fog start, the background gets really white-ish because there's a lot of fog in that area, and that's cool. And it's a little bit distant from the camera, and things tend to disappear at that area. And the fog end. You can adjust these values however you feel like to make your island look more realistic and give it that more tasteful look. Now this is what I'm going to do in order to make this look a little bit better. Once you start adding a lot more vertices, it starts to take on more life. And you definitely want to make sure the vertices X and Y are close values, because then it starts to look a little bit more fake if you don't do that. And you can play with this too. The tessellate is triangles and all of that. If I were to bring this value up. And here's another thing, guys, is when you're doing this, you can adjust your Z max value to be quite high. You can even make it 0.49, 0.30, 0.51, whatever it may be, just to add more to your landscape. And here's another thing, make sure you adjust the visibility parameter, because if you start your fog start value a little bit lower, you're going to see the background disappears a lot. So make sure you keep adding to this value as your island gets bigger and you'll start to see more in the back. Like for example, let me just lower this to 150 by 150 so we can see what's going on, the vertices, and then now you can see the fog start is a really important parameter in this entire tutorial. You're going to have to adjust that to your taste however you feel like, and then you can see the background dissipates as you adjust this value. This is a really important thing if you're going to make realistic looking environments. So yeah, let's take a look at this. I'm going to bump up the quality just a bit to, the vertices is going to be 640 by 600. Make sure these two values are quite close to each other, so, and then it starts to actually look a little bit more realistic. You can change the triangles to quads, adds a little bit more detail to it. And yeah, let's take a look. Alright guys, so as you can tell, it definitely needs a lot more adjusting and all of that. And we can start fixing these things by going into details. And it is truly all about the details. For example, if you're going to make this first bout of snow, you want to make sure that the audience knows that the ground has reacted to the sword hitting the ground. So you want to make sure you get that as well. And then the camera slowly pans back during that entire portion. You can bring the camera back quite a bit. Here, I'm going to adjust the green screen just a bit, and there. I'm going to add this to it. I'm going to start it down here somewhere. You can have the camera start all the way there, and then start bringing it back. There. You're going to see there's a lot of little details you need to look out for if you want to really accomplish this effect. And of course, the sounds are really, really important. You want to make sure that when the camera shakes, the first bout of the mountain starts to grow. And I want to tell you guys one other thing, is when you create this island, is you want to make sure that it looks quite decently realistic. So you can start adjusting the frequency, the amplitude, start playing around with these values. And the most important thing I'd say that you should be working with is probably the frequency X and the Y. This helps a lot too. Make sure you play with this area. It just brings it closer. Just adds a lot more detail and depth to your it just adds a lot more detail to your island. And make sure you have lots of pixels, lots of vertices, X and Y. Just helps bring it to life a little bit, and you can tell it just smooths out everything. If you want it to be a lot more rocky, awesome, just adjust the complexity. And as you can tell, the higher the values get, the slower the rendering time, because it just needs to make room for a lot of the details. So as you can tell, this is very high complexity, lots of polygons, lots of stuff going on. Okay, so let me know what you guys end up creating. This is insane. Let's make this 6. And yeah, I'm looking forward to what you guys come up with. Thank you so much. Take care.